What's going on, all you reel beasts? So I was going to do the rod and reel portion of my video. I did the lures the other day and I was going to post it, but I think I'm going to have to change it, seeing as that I have been invited to a Shimano and G Loomis event, which I'm actually going to right now. Yeah, so there's a possibility of me coming back with a lot better equipment to add to the video. So y'all just stay tuned and we'll see what I come back with. What's up, all you real beasts? So it's been a little bit longer than what I planned on to put another video out. I was going to put the other part of our tackle video just basically the week right after when I did the one for all the lures, but we had several things come up. First, I got invited to a Shimano and G Loomis event. They only allowed like 30 people in the whole area to actually go to this. So it was kind of surprising that I would get invited to it. I did get a little bit of free swag, nothing too major. Got some good deals on fishing poles, which ultimately is why I waited until now to do it, because I added to the collection. Got a couple more rods that probably shouldn't have, but it happened. So I've got some more equipment to talk about. And then also we had a Florida trip come up, which was literally like right after. And so I figured, why not wait until we got back from then? Had some really cool stuff happen while we were down there. Oh, there we go. Hey, Maria, come hold the light for me. And y'all will definitely get to see that in another week or so. I'm going to try to have that video out basically the week after this one. So, having said that, let's get into it. So I'm going to try to make this a little bit quicker than the other one. I'm not going to get stuck in a bunch of stories, or at least I'm going to try not to. So, I believe I will start with this one. So since we moved back, I have got back into bass fishing pretty heavy. There's a lot of really nice bass down here. I catch really large bass. That's where all my biggest bass came from, is down here in Georgia and Alabama. So I decided to go ahead and, update my equipment, I guess you could say. I had a lot of older rods that were still good, but, after 10 years or so, the eyes were coming off, glue was cracking, the blanks were getting basically dry rotted. Even though I took very good care of them, I could tell that they were getting really weak after all the years of being used, because I've done more than just bass fish with them. Let's be for real. I put my equipment through hell when I go fishing. So this is actually one of the older reels, and you've seen in some of the other videos. It's the old Revo Toro. I think it's the 40. Or, no, the 50. Yeah, it's the 50. I don't know why I said 40. They had the 50 and the 60 back in the day. I decided back then I didn't need as big of a reel. So I went with the 50. But at the time, this was the first one to come out on the market, bass fishing-wise, that had massive drag. We're talking 23, 24, possibly 25 pounds of drag. I actually took it off of the old rod that I used to have, which was it was a Bass Pro Shop. I can't remember. It was one of their brands. It was basically their heavy version of a swim bait rod at the time. But compared to swim bait rods now, it was not heavy at all. I mean, back then it was. Now, it'd basically be a medium heavy. Basically the lower end of a medium heavy. Back then, all I would throw were small swim baits between 3 and 4.5 inches. You know, all these big swim baits, that's new stuff. So I actually took this reel off of that rod. That rod was, you know, it's seen better days. And I put it on a Mojo Bass. This is their 7'10" heavy power. And basically, this is going to be my Alabama rig setup. It's got enough tip that it still has good action, but the backbone is incredible. I've used St. Croix stuff before, and that's who this is, St. Croix. I've got some of their fly rods that are really good. So I actually know this brand pretty well. I'm not familiar with their bass fishing equipment, but this rod, whenever I was testing it, had a lot of power. And I've used it a few times, but I haven't done anything in videos yet. So that's why you haven't seen it yet, but I have used it a couple of times. It's rated 1 to 4 ounce lures and 14 to 30 pound test line. Trying to think. I believe this setup is 50 pound braid. Yeah, 50 pound Power Pro. And I use a 15 to 20 pound fluorocarbon tip for the leader material. And just because, you know, sometimes I believe the fish can see the braid. Not all the time, but there are situations where clear water I fish, they can see it. So I use the fluorocarbon, and it does really well. I actually took it out to one of our local reservoirs and was basically trolling an Alabama rig behind the kayak I was in. And it did really, really well. And I can't wait to actually like land good fish on this thing, because one thing that happens down here using Alabama rigs, you have the possibility of getting 2, 3, sometimes 4 big bass on a lure. And when I say big bass, I'm talking 5 pound plus. It's insane whenever Alabama rigs go off down here. But anyway, moving on from that, I'm going to go to, so this is one of the ones that I got from the event. I spent a little too much money, but it's going to be well worth it. So I got the G Loomis, the IMX Pro. It's their swim bait rod. It's the 966. So this thing is rated to 8 ounce lures and 25 to 45 pound test line. Incredibly powerful setup. This is a really, really nice rod. It's basically a broomstick. And I mean, and for what I'm going to use it for, it needs to be. And I paired it with the Tranx 400 HG. This is basically my highest end bass setup. Not bragging. I mean, you know, if you have the money, I would say get better equipment, because, you know, you'll be glad you have it when you hook a bigger fish. We've had that discussion in the past. I had the money. They had a big discount going on at the event. So I decided to go ahead and just dive in and get the equipment now while I can. And I've got 65 pound test braid on this setup. And this one, I'm basically going to be using this for big glide baits. 90% of the time, I'm going to be throwing big S-wavers and things like that that are, you know, 6 to 8 ounces and like 10 to 14 inch long baits, but, you know, hard body and jointed. So whenever you sit there and snap the rod tip while you're reeling, the lure comes through the water in like wide S shapes. I don't know if you don't know what it is. They're really good. They're subsurface, but you can keep them right near the top. And they catch massive fish. I've had some huge bass follow those big S-wavers. And this setup is primarily just going to be for that. Like I said, it's a broomstick. It has a little bit of tip to it, not much. I want to say this is more like a 80-20 setup, 80% backbone, 20% tip. But that's perfect for the way that I fish. I get a lot of action out of this setup. I've only tested it. I haven't had a chance to actually fish it yet. I'm going to try to move on to, let's go ahead and do this one. So This is a reel that you've probably seen in one of my videos before. I've had it for about a year now. It's the Cardiff 400A. Was my original swim bait reel. I used this. I was throwing my big Huddleston Deluxe, the trout looking lure, and it works good for that. But I decided, since I was getting new equipment, to put it on a different rod, take it off, put it on a different rod, and designate it for something else. So I actually got, at that same event, I got a Dobyns Fury series, their swim bait, glide bait, and umbrella rig, and it's a 7'9", 15 to 30 pound. Most of these are going to be around that range. And this bad boy, once again, it's a heavy setup, but they're heavy. This heavy right here almost acts like a, it's closer to a medium heavy. I mean, it actually says medium heavy on the rod, but it's like the top end of medium heavy. It's literally right at just a heavy action rod. And I am going to use big top waters with this. This is literally going to be just giant whopper ploppers, like the big whopper ploppers, the 190s, and like giant Zara spooks, the saltwater series, big bass, big striped bass. I feel like this reel does better with those kind of lures than it was doing with the swim bait. I always felt like, even though it handled it, the swim bait, basically, when you had to push hard to try to stop the cast, like break it, I mean, you're just like burning the end of your thumb. And like it's got no brakes towards that. Not enough anyway. But for top waters, this is perfect. It throws forever. Like, I mean, it's ridiculous how far you can throw this setup. This one also has 65-pound braid. And right now, it's got a 25-pound test fluorocarbon tip. But that's because that's the same tip that I was using for the swim baits. I'm actually going to go to just mono on the end, probably 20-pound mono, because mono floats better than fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon sinks. I want it to help keep the topwater bait above water. I don't want it pulling it under. So that's actually going to come off when I do start using it. It's a really sweet setup. Believe it or not, it's incredibly light for as heavy as it is, you know. Like, you would think that this would weigh just a ton, but this setup, I could throw this all day and not get tired. It's really, really nice. One of the other ones that I got, so at that event, I did get a couple of other G. Loomis rods, but I don't have reels for them. So what I decided to do was the Dobyns rod that I had before, the Champion, the 908, that's the Super Mag. This is the one that I had, that reel we just talked about, on this rod, throwing these huge, huge swim baits. This one right here, the giant Huddleston Deluxe, this is like their 10-inch model. And this thing is heavy. It's like 8-9 ounces. It's ridiculous how heavy this lure is. And that reel, like I said before, was having trouble throwing these kind of lures. It would throw them, but it would about have to break your thumb to stop the cast. So while I was at the event, one of the other things that I got was this Revo Toro. This is their new Revo Toro, or newer. It's the Revo Toro Beast. So this is the new setup for my swim baits. It's going to sound kind of bad, but I put the Power Pro Onyx, the V2, on here just because not only is it darker, the fish can't see it as well, but it looks really good on this setup. I put the 80-pound braid on this because I'm going to be fishing super, super heavy, basically little to no drag whatsoever. This setup is strictly giant swim baits for giant fish. You do not fight a fish on this setup. You set the hook and you crank them in as hard as you can to keep them from throwing the lure. I do fish a treble hook on the top of my Huddlestons. A lot of people don't. I do, because a lot of the bass around here, they short strike. They like to pop at the tail. And this way I get them if they do try to hit at it. But this is my best, heaviest setup for bass fishing. I mean, you want to talk a broomstick? This rod right here with this 10 inch, like 9-ounce lure, it doesn't even bend the end of this rod, but just like that much. You can just tell there's weight there, but it doesn't bend much. And this reel absolutely handles any heavy lure that I throw on this. It's got the huge power knob. This bad boy is meant for big, big fish. I actually want to take it to saltwater just to test out the actual power of the reel against some of the giant black drum and those giant redfish. So you're going to be seeing this setup a lot more now that I'm back home and I know there are bass that can actually, hit a lure this big. I'm going to do a lot more trophy bass fishing. You'll see in these videos coming up. So that's it for my bass fishing stuff. I have 2 more rods. I can't go without getting some kind of saltwater set up. So I got this one right here, which I've already used. It's already rigged up. I took it last weekend down to Panama City and didn't really catch anything. Caught some catfish, nothing to test it out. But it's the Daiwa Saltist. It's the 20. It's got about 25, 30 pounds of drag, somewhere around there. And I put it on the Lew's, the M2 jigging rod, the speed stick. And it's perfect. This is literally used for my kayak. It's a short rod. It's like 5 foot long, which is perfect because the longer the rod is on a kayak, the harder it is to stay stabilized. But with a short rod, you don't really have to worry about it as much. I'm going to be using it mostly for live bait fishing, for big stripes, or like basically a weightless bait for catfish. I'll use it a lot for that. You can see just using it off the pier, I had just a pyramid weight. I basically just wanted to see how it would handle, and it did good. I didn't hang into anything big to test it, but that's okay. I'll get another chance one day. We're hoping to go back here soon. So, and this looks and feels incredible. This reel is smooth. It fit, when I bass fish, I hold a reel like this. So having this setup be this size, it feels good in your hand. It looks good. And the rod is actually, once again, it's a heavier rod, but it's not so heavy as to be uncomfortable. Being the shorter rod and it being like just basically stiff. It's a jigging rod. My hook sets are just on point. Like when you set the hook, you got to be careful because you'll set the hook too hard. Everything is translated through this rod right to the end of the hook, and you don't really lose fish. So that's one, and then the other. This is kind of like an in between of bass fishing and saltwater. So I got another Revo. It's the Revo Toro S. It's the newer model. This is another really, really nice setup. I love on this rod, the trigger down here. It feels good. It actually looks really good. This is what is this? A Virtus? I've never seen, I guess this is newer. It has to be because I haven't really seen these before. This is a 7.9. It's a medium heavy, but this acts like a heavy action rod. It says medium heavy, but it's another one that's like really heavy action. 4-ounce lures, 25 to 50 pound line. This is their Inshore series rod. And so this one is also paired with 80-pound braid because I'm going to basically be fishing for big redfish and big black drum. Any of those big inshore species like that is going to be used on this. Another oversized reel. It's got a huge gauge on the side to adjust the weight of your lures. Giant drag knob, giant power knob for just cranking in big fish. This is going to be a really fun setup. This setup, the only thing heavy is the reel. Like the rod basically weighs nothing. I mean, it absolutely weighs nothing. The reel is kind of heavy, but that's okay because the rod being so long, it actually kind of puts more of the balance towards your hand and like your wrist. So you actually have more control on the fish. It don't feel like you're doing a teeter-totter so much whenever you're fighting something. Like, I haven't had a chance to use this yet. That's just my experience from like testing it with like weights and things of that nature, just to see how the rod reacts. And it feels really, really good. It's almost like the power is just kept right basically in your elbow and your wrist. This pretty much completes everything. There were some other smaller setups that I got, but they're not as, you know, first of all, they're not as high end as these. This is the highest end stuff that I feel you can get with bass fishing that you can possibly get without it just being mostly for looks. This stuff is functional. It's powerful. You know, I love Revo. Revo is like my favorite bass fishing reel, period. Having said that, you know, I absolutely love Shimano. Some of my shark fishing reels are Shimano. My first ever saltwater setup was Shimano. So that Tranx, I'm excited to give that a try because that's going to be a really strong setup. I can't wait to get back out on the water. We're going back to Panama City here in another couple of days. Real exciting stuff. Going to be doing some more shark fishing. This is starting to get to the time of year where I do less of this kind of stuff and going to be doing more fishing. So you're still going to see tackle videos. We got the new series coming out, our story time basically, where we're going to start sharing some of our best memories and trips fishing from the past. We're going to have a lot of events going on this year. I'm super excited for the start of this new year. Like, I can't wait. I'm hoping that this is going to be the best fishing year that I've had in a long time. So with that, I will see y'all back out on the water. Peace.